I never actually thought something would happen to me. I've always enjoyed reading real life creepy stories and have developed a quite paranoid persona, something I always thought would just be a novelty. A few years ago, when I was 19, I'm a female by the way, I was coming home from watching a firework display on New Year's Eve. It was 3 a.m. when I reached my safe, family friendly, nothing ever happens neighborhood. I'm from Sydney, Australia, and I live in a wealthier area. My friends wanted to call a taxi because we didn't want to wake our poor parents up at this hour to drive us back home. Because of my stubbornness and insistence, we ended up taking the very long walk home. My friend Aiden was complaining most of the time. Guess you can't blame him really. My other friend Rowan was silent and compliant. I was cheerful. When we reached almost my street, we split ways. The guys continued on their very long way home, which was much longer than mine, and I continued on my way home. When I passed a little cake shop, I noticed a guy across the street. I only looked at him briefly, but something in the way he quickly looked up at me, almost in an interest, caught my attention. I hurried on anyway, because I'm usually paranoid about things, and 99% of the time, it's just me being paranoid. I turned onto my street, which was much darker than I anticipated. This was about 3:15, mind you. As I passed the bowling club and the oval, I kept looking behind me just to make sure. It was getting quite cold and dark, so I started feeling creeped out, but there was no one behind me. No one anywhere as far as I could see. I was halfway down my street where the road dips down when I noticed something on the path in front of me. I couldn't tell what it was, and at the last minute, I stepped off the path onto the road to avoid it, because it looked like it might be a dead animal. As I stepped onto the road, I turned slightly and saw that there was someone behind me. They weren't too close, but they weren't too far away either. And I remember my heart leapt out of my throat because I hadn't seen them before, and for them to have gotten that close in such a short space of time, something about it didn't sit well with me. When I told people about this later, they said that I should have been quite suspect about this then. It's 3 a.m. in the morning and you're quietly walking behind a girl, not even bothering to keep a safe distance. Like, if you're really innocent, wouldn't you take the measures to emphasize that? I couldn't see who it was, nor could I tell if it was a male or a female because it was just jet black to me. It was a very brief glimpse, and I was scared though, so I whipped out my phone and started to call Aiden. I kept calling him, but my silly phone wouldn't connect me to him. So I tried to call Rowan, but he wouldn't pick up. I kept this up for at least 5 minutes, getting increasingly anxious, but not daring to look behind me to see if he was still there. I'm glad I didn't, actually. I think I really would have freaked out if I had confirmed it. By that time, I reached my driveway and I hurried up into it, thinking I was safe, but as I was halfway up, I looked over my shoulder again, just really quickly, and I saw the figure there once again. The way I explain this next bit is really confused and muddled, because on the one hand, it may have looked like he was merely passing my driveway, but on the other hand, I am much more certain that it looked like he was just about to step onto my driveway as I walk up to it. And at that precise moment, I thought that it occurred to me that he may have been my brother Jonathan, because no one else would bother walking up my driveway. Even if some guy was following me, it never occurred to me that they would really go to the lengths of going up the driveway as well. I thought I was completely safe because I had the advantage of having my house close by when he started following me. However, something about the build of this figure didn't seem like Jonathan to me, so I hurried on anyway. My beautiful, wonderful, amazing mother had stayed up to wait for me, and I'm so glad, because she opened the door for me as soon as I knocked. I hate to imagine what would have happened if I had to wait for a while. I went inside, but I left the second door open and the outside light on because I thought Jonathan might be coming up any second now. But Mom was like, "You can turn him off. Your brother came back 2 hours ago." I did get a little bit creeped out then, but I just dismissed the thought, because we are so quick to think that we are always safe. I closed the door and shut off the light and went to get a drink of water. My mom went to bed. I went to my bedroom to grab my clothes and then went to the bathroom to take a shower. I switched off the living room lights. This is sort of funny now that I think about it, Before I took a shower, I replied back to a message from Aiden, who was asking if I made it home safe. I demanded to know why he hadn't picked up his phone, and then told him that I was creeped out for a few minutes, but I was okay now. Then, as I showered, I actually thought about that figure. I wasn't too convinced that it was following me, but my mind did teeter into wondering this. In any case, I remember thinking that it was okay because I was safe now. Then, near the end of my shower, I heard something at the window. It didn't sound like the usual creaking or bumping of an old house. The way I describe it to other people was like the sound of someone resting their hands against the window to steady themselves. It sounded really unnatural, I know, because it caught my attention straight away, and I immediately jumped to the possibility that there might be someone outside. And I know that the only really strange sound would make me do what I did next, which was turn off the water and crouch under the window, hiding and waiting. I waited for quite some time, too scared to move, for a few minutes, but there was nothing. So I gingerly crawled out, still too scared to stand up properly, and I switched off the bathroom lights. Then, it was impossible for me to dry myself and dress myself, so I turned on the heater light, which is much smaller and dimmer. But as I did that, I noticed at the window that there were very small blue lights there that certainly never belonged there. The way I can describe it now, it's almost like a keypad of a phone lit up. I was so scared, but I switched off the heater light as well and backed into the corner. My towel was wrapped around me, and I waited. It seemed like a long time that I waited, too scared to unlock the door and move because I knew I would make a lot of noise. And as I waited in the pitch darkness, several blue lights came on outside my window. Like a few, it became very bright and they were moving it, trying to shine it through the window. Now that I think about it, was it a phone? I'm not really sure. There were a few lights though. But that did it. I practically bolted for my mom. I unlocked the door and went into my parents' room, trembling like a leaf, and convinced that there was someone outside my bathroom window. I was very clearly upset, so my mom ushered me around, trying to find a safe room for me to change into. My dad apparently had heard the footsteps hurrying back down the driveway, and I'm glad that he did, because the situation feels so surreal to me now that I'm not even sure if it really happened. Maybe I imagined it all, but this is confirmation that it wasn't just my imagination. I was so shaky, I slid into bed and couldn't sleep the whole night until it was morning, and even when it was morning, I was still terrified, especially when I heard Dad leave the house and go into the backyard. So that's my lesson learned. Never walk home at night again. I'm a bit worried during the daytime. We never found out who it was. People wonder if it was the same person I passed earlier, but I don't think so. My brother doesn't think so either. He says it may have been someone lurking at the oval who came out of the little hole as soon as I walked past the supposed dead animal on the path, because of how suddenly they appeared behind me. If you're a girl, please don't walk home alone at night. It only takes one moment for you to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it can go very wrong. This is by far one of the most creepy things that have happened to me to date. I usually feel fairly safe in my town, but this one incident has certainly awakened me to the fact that no place is perfectly safe. It was this past New Year's Eve when my friend called me and asked if I wanted to go to a New Year's Eve festival at the beach with her and her boyfriend. Being the kind of person who normally just stays at home and does nothing, especially for particular holidays, I of course agreed. Every New Year's Eve, my town holds a festival at the beach in celebration. Rides and games are set up, and bands play live music, and clubs hold late-night fancy dress parties, and at midnight on the dot, there's a series of firework displays that are put on for the public. Normally thousands of people turn up, so the beach can get quite loud and crowded, but it's still a pleasant atmosphere all around. Before hanging up, my friend Jess asks me if I'll pick up her boyfriend Tyler on the way to the beach. She also lets me know that one of her other close friends is coming along and that we should go straight to her unit so that we can walk down to the festival together. I tell Jess, no problem, and then go to get ready. In about a half an hour, I'm ready. I do not have my license yet, so I asked my dad if he would pick me up and my friends and drop us off. He agreed. It only takes about 3 minutes to drive to my friend's place, and then a further 10 minutes drive to my other friend's unit. The other friend, Haley, lives in a small 2-bedroom apartment with her mother. The unit is right next to the beach, and it only takes around 5 minutes to walk down there to where the festival takes place. When we arrive, she is already outside waiting for us, standing on the balcony and enjoying the sunset. We all file out of the car, making sure to thank my dad for dropping us off, and then head upstairs to greet Haley. We all hug and begin to catch up, as we hadn't seen each other for a couple of months. We all headed inside for about 10 minutes to grab a drink and catch up a little bit more. Haley's mother came out and talked to us for a bit as well. At this point, the sun had almost well and truly disappeared, so we decided that this was the perfect time to head down to the festival. The walk down to the beach was pleasant. It was a warm summer night. There was a cool breeze to ward off the heat, and the whole area smelled like cotton candy, buttered corn, and warm donuts. We spent the first few hours going on rides together, and then we went and bought some food and sat down on the sand to eat it. So far, the night was amazing. As usual, whenever I went out with my friends, there was always parents with us, but tonight, there wasn't any. It felt like great freedom. After we went up to the stage where the live bands were playing and danced for about an hour, there were plenty of classics being played, such as YMCA, Time Warp, and various other hits from Grease. All in all, it was a pretty fun time. After an hour of dancing to music, the 4 of us decided to head back to Haley's unit for a drink of water, as we all had spent most of our money. At this point, it was well and truly dark, around 11 o'clock, and the heat of the day had just subsided to a pleasant warmth. We walked along the path, merely saying Happy New Year to every passing group or even cops. A few partygoers on the 4th floor of the apartment complex shouted, "Hope you have an epic New Year," drunkenly at us. We laughed and wished them the same. As we walked further away from the crowds and the noise, the light grew less and less. There aren't many street lights near my friend's unit, and we were soon engulfed in a soothing darkness with only the moonlight in our way. It was at this point that I for some reason began to feel uneasy. It was too quiet for my tastes. You know that feeling you get when you're being watched, or at least you think you're being watched? That exact feeling washed over me, and I subconsciously moved to walk in between Haley and Tyler instead of walking on the outside of the group. I shrugged off the feeling after that, attributing it to the fact that perhaps my ears were just used to the loud noises of the festival. They were, after all, ringing a little bit. We ran into another group of people that we went to school with along the way, and the feeling was completely forgotten. I had missed these people after graduation, and I immediately struck up a friendly, lighthearted conversation. We parted ways as we made it to Haley's unit block and climbed the stairs to her unit. Haley's mother and the mother's boyfriend greeted us upon arrival, and we all got a drink of water from the refrigerator before relaxing together on the couch. We were all a little bit worn out at this point, and the fireworks weren't for another hour, so we decided to chill at the unit and head back down to the beach at around 11:45. We all joked around and had a snack, and then Haley asked if she could sleep over at my place. I call my parents to check if it's okay with them, and they give me the okay. My parents love having Haley over. She's a very well-mannered person and likes to help out where she can. At 11:45, we all leave the unit and begin heading back down to the beach. We only get about a minute down the road before Haley says that she forgot her pain medication for her bad knee, which she's supposed to take before bed. At this point, Jess seems a little annoyed, but reluctantly agrees that we should go back so we don't have to go back and make another trip at the end of the night. We head back, and the whole way, Jess seems a little distant, like her mind isn't on the conversation at hand, and she focused on something else. I'm the most quiet and observant one of the group, so I notice her silence pretty quickly, since she's usually a big chatterbox. I asked her if she's alright, and she replies with, "Of course," and I so simply leave her alone to her thoughts. After retrieving Haley's pain medication, we head back out again. This time, Jess suggests that we walk on the other side of the road, where it is more well lit, and where there are parents with their children on the playground. When we're halfway across the road, Jess mutters to us, Don't look behind us." My first thought is maybe that there's a drunk person with their pants down taking a piss against the wall or something. But then Jess adds, "Walk faster." I begin to feel uneasy immediately, and I obey her request. None of us look back. Despite that nagging human instinct to look, I trust Jess. We were across the road. I ask Jess what's wrong and why she's on edge. She replies to me, "There's 3 guys in black hoodies following us. I recognize them from earlier." Earlier, I think to myself, puzzled. And then Jess explains that she saw those same 3 men. They had to be men. They were tall and bulky. When we came to the unit for water earlier, a chill runs down my spine, and I realize that my sense of being watched probably came from those men. What made me even more creeped out was the fact that they had waited all that time for us to come out. Unable to resist, I glance sideways out of my peripheral vision, and my heart hammers in my chest when I notice the 3 men. They are indeed, rather pointedly, following us. They have their hoodies zipped all the way up to their chins. This would not be so unusual if it wasn't for the fact that it was a hot night. There was no need for a hoodie or any kind of jacket. And they were wearing bandanas over their mouths and noses. I couldn't make out either of their facial features, and this scared me. Jess prompts us again to not look and suggests that we walk even faster. We do so, despite the fact that Haley, Tyler, and I are all tall and strong-built people. I should mention now that I'm an 18-year-old female, and despite my build and reasonable strength, I understandably didn't want to tangle with 3 big, unknown men dressed all in black with bandanas covering their features. It crossed my mind that they probably thought we were good targets. Jess was short and thin. They most likely heard that Haley needs pain medication. I walked with an obvious limp, as I have arthritis in my knee, and Tyler had his hands full, being the pack mule as they call it. Despite Jess's instructions, I can't help but give the occasional glance at the 3 men, and of course, they continue to follow us. They had even increased their pace to nearly match ours and kept looking over at us. I think they meant to intimidate us, as they made it quite obvious that they were staring at us. I stopped looking over after realizing that they could probably tell I was trying to keep an eye on them, and instead opted to use my keen hearing to make sure that they stayed across the road. I wasn't fond of this, as they could have had a knife or a gun or anything, and if they suddenly sprinted at us, I wouldn't be prepared. But I didn't want to provoke them by staring. I'm not a fast runner, and my stamina leaves much to be desired. At this point, the path ends and gives way to brushes and shrubs. The brushland is quite easy to go around, but doing so would mean moving closer to the unknown men following us. None of us wanted to do that, so we make an unspoken agreement to take a shortcut through the bushes. The bushland doesn't go on for very long, and it would take us straight to the festival, where we could quite possibly lose those men. We head into the bushes, taking care to stay together and watch for snakes, as the summer is the season when snakes like to come out the most, especially at the beach. It's Snake City. About halfway through, we all recognize the sound of dried grass and leaves crunching underfoot, then hear rapid and heavy footsteps. We all broke into a sprint, and not daring to look back at this point. We didn't have to look, knowing that the men were chasing us, and their confidence at going after 4 fully grown teenagers pretty much assured me that they were armed with weapons of some sort. We were not armed with anything, and quite frankly, we were all so spooked and we didn't want to think straight. Our only instinct was to run as fast as possible. We made it out of the bushland together, raced across the car park, and slowly jogged when we reached the crowds. We didn't stop, but as we steadily slowed to a hurried walk, I looked over my shoulder and recognized the 3 unknown men lurking across the car park. Moonlight glared off the surface of the metallic object in the taller one's hand. I immediately felt ill. We hurried down to where the biggest crowd was, gathered onto the sand in preparation for the fireworks. Picking a spot between 2 large groups, we settled down and caught our breaths. Funny enough, all 4 of us have asthma, which we often joke about, saying that we found each other and bonded because of it, and we were all panting quite heavily. Tyler and I have it a bit worse than Haley and Jess, and you could hear us wheezing as we panted. Soon the fireworks started, and we all had calmed down enough to somewhat enjoy them, although The unknown men were still in the back of our minds. Our original plan was to leave before the fireworks finished so we could avoid the big crowds, but instead, we opted to leave with the crowds. We walked down the road to the bigger car park where my dad was going to pick us up, making sure to stay around people. When we reached the car park, I called my dad, and he said that he would be there to pick us up in around 10 minutes. After hanging up, I sat on the side of the path with my friends and waited. 5 minutes passed, and bored, I decided to look around, as there were still many bustling crowds making their way to the cars. There was a bit of a traffic jam too, as many cars were trying to leave at the same time. I looked across the road and realized with a jolt that the 3 men in black hoodies were there, half hidden behind a tree where there was no light. Even though I couldn't see their eyes, I could tell that they were staring right back. They knew I spotted them. The taller one discreetly showed his knife, waving it a little bit as if it was to taunt me. He then raised it up to his throat and then made a slow, mocking slicing motion. I quickly told my friends, and we moved to a different spot, and making sure to stay in the light and stay in the sight of other people. My dad arrived soon after, and we quickly climbed into his car. None of us spoke a word of what happened, and since then, I haven't had any issues with anyone following me or my friends. It still gives me the creeps though. Whoever those men were, their intentions could not have been good.